Putin is in a panic over the possibility of a coup and being removed from power. There is a sense of panic in the Kremlin as they are running out of cards to keep playing the game. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump is tightening the screws on Russia with new sanctions. This is reported by The Telegraph, which notes that the position of the Russian Federation is beginning to weaken. The fact that paranoia in the Kremlin has intensified is also evidenced by the recent accusation by Russia's FSB against Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who now lives in London, and 22 members of the Russian anti-war committee, alleging they were preparing a coup d'état. They have been charged with violent seizure of power and the creation of a terrorist organization. The grounds for these accusations were the declaration adopted in Berlin in 2023 by the Russian Anti-War Committee, as well as the creation of a platform for Russian democratic forces at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. According to the Security Service, Khodorkovsky presents this platform to Western countries as a constituent assembly for a transitional period and as an alternative to the authorities of the Russian Federation. Experts describe such actions as a manifestation of Putin's new sense of vulnerability. Former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine John Herbst noted,
"The Kremlin is paranoid. Putin is looking for enemies to strengthen his regime."
According to the expert, Putin is being overly cautious. In his words, the FSB's accusations indicate the Kremlin's fear regarding a transfer of power. After all, in the event of Putin's death, there is no obvious successor.
The prime minister appointed by Putin, the courts and parliaments, all of whose legitimacy is questionable. This is the reality of Russia.
Experts also note that the international legitimacy of the Russian opposition could become a key factor in the event of a sudden change of power. That is precisely why the Kremlin is trying to discredit and intimidate the anti-war committee. Since coming to power, Putin has systematically eliminated those who oppose him, writes The Telegraph, recalling Yevgeny Prigozhin, who tried to march on Moscow by force. He was defeated and his uprising failed.
This is not a military coup. This is a peaceful march for justice, for fairness.
Putin is also afraid of his own generals, according to opposition figure Mikhail Khodorkovsky. The war has been going on for 3.5 years, yet the names of the so-called heroes are kept quiet.
The main reason, in my opinion, is that the Kremlin is pathologically afraid of popular military commanders. They are afraid that someone like a Bonaparte will suddenly emerge from the ranks of the army and, following Prigozhin's example, turn the troops in a completely different direction.
Meanwhile, Russia's economy is beginning to collapse. The Ministry of Economic Development has warned the country is on the verge of recession. According to Thomas Keating from the Royal United Services Institute, Russia's economic weakness could prompt external players to take more active measures. Experts claim that China's leader Xi Jinping could stop the war and bring down the Russian Federation's economy if he wanted to. The main buyers of Russian oil, India and China, have already reduced their purchases in response to the US decision on sanctions. This could result in Putin's war machine losing its most crucial source of income. Moreover, the war is affecting people all over the country near Russian oil refineries. After attacks by Ukrainian drones, plumes of smoke rise into the air. This leads to a sharp spike in gasoline prices and a fuel shortage.
The Russian dictator Vladimir Putin will lose the war, and Russia's situation is becoming increasingly desperate. This is what political scientist Mark Brolin writes in an article for The Telegraph. According to him, because of the war unleashed against Ukraine, Russia is increasingly turning into a vassal of China. Having lost Western oil markets, the country has achieved only partial control over Ukrainian territory at the cost of enormous human and economic losses. At the same time, Europe and the United States are acting in concert. EU countries are strengthening their defense sector and reducing their dependence on Russian energy, and American sanctions have increased pressure on the occupier's oil sector. Fearing secondary sanctions, Chinese and Indian companies have reduced their purchases of Russian oil. According to the author of the article, the myth of Russia as a great power is close to being debunked. Mark Brolin concludes that Russia cannot wage war forever, and to bring peace closer, pressure on the aggressor country must be increased. Recently, the Ukrainian armed forces have been successfully attacking military factories and oil refining facilities on Russian territory. In addition, the defense forces have achieved certain successes on the front line, despite the enemy's active attacks. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has confirmed the liberation of 2 settlements in Donbas, Kucheryav Yar and Puketsky. Soon it became known that the defense forces had liberated another settlement, Zatishok. According to reports from the General Staff, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Russia's losses have amounted to 1,139,000 Russian soldiers.
They are fighting against the Putin regime for the freedom of their peoples. A Yakut and a Tatar ended up in Ukraine as part of the occupying army. But they came to their senses, and now they are soldiers in the Nomad unit, which is part of the International Legion of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine. It consists of representatives of the indigenous peoples of the Federation, mainly of Turkic and Mongolic origin. And its goal is the collapse of the Bloody Empire. How did Yakuts, Tatars, Bashkirs, and Kalmyks become Ukrainian defenders? Watch further to find out.
Both of them are dressed in Ukrainian pixel camouflage and carry NATO weapons.
M1601.
I like it.
But when it comes to their combat path, they clarify which period is being discussed.
What was the attitude from the commanders?
From which side?
From the Russian side?
Bad. Frankly, that's all I can say.
This is a 35-year-old Tatar from Bashkiria who took the call sign Sevdokar. His peer and comrade from Yakutia is Erel. Here he is in a recording for the Nomad unit addressing his fellow countrymen in the ranks of the Russian army.
In the brutal war unleashed by Moscow, 10,000 kilometers away from their families, the Kremlin is destroying the best sons of Sakha in local assaults.
This year, RL signed contracts with the Russian army, claiming he did so to surrender, fight for Ukraine, and take revenge on Putin's henchmen for the decline of his people.
This was in the early spring of this year, around the time when the weather was changing. He couldn't cross the border on his own. He had to do it.
And on his very first combat mission, he raised his hands in the air.
I listened to the voices, came out, and surrendered.
Weren't you afraid to surrender?
No.
Karpa was mobilized into Russia's terrorist army in the fall of 2022.
I was the first to be mobilized. I was working in Moscow. My sister calls me and says, "Come home, mobilization has started here." I had to come back. They took me to Tatarstan. That's where we did our training.
The Russian claims he served in the occupying forces in Luhansk region and was captured in Kursk region.
They sent us there as cannon fodder. We had no food, no water, nothing left. After 4 days, we ultimately decided basically to surrender.
Tell me, when you surrendered, were you planning to serve on the Ukrainian side?
Yes. I watched a lot of videos while we were sitting at the positions about Nomad, yeah. I watched videos about Nomad.
Nomad is a unit created this year by the main intelligence directorate as part of the International Legion. Its fighters call themselves representatives of the free peoples of the Russian Federation. Their goal is the collapse of the empire.
Should Bashkiria be an independent state?
Yes, about 80% there want this. This Putin regime has already lasted for 25 years. But it needs to be broken somehow. Without this, nothing will change.
Both Russian prisoners have undergone.
This step involves performing a series of thorough checks to ensure that everything is functioning correctly and according to the required standards.
Combat training and are fighting for Ukraine.
And,
What's so bad there?
well, if you don't do exactly what they say and do it as they say, they can, as they say, just erase you.
Who did you leave at home?
My sisters, my wife, and my mother. And my father, somewhere. They...
Know about your fate?
Yes,
Is your only connection to Russia in the main case?
Well, of course there is.
I do have relatives, but most of them have already been buried back home.
The guys say they've submitted documents to obtain Ukrainian citizenship and are gradually learning the language of their second homeland.
Have you learnt any Ukrainian words yet?
Just the basics. Like thank you.
Have you learned anything, any Ukrainian words yet?
Well, some words, yes, I understand.
And can you say something?
Wishing you good health.
How long are you prepared to fight?
Until all of this is over. I think it won't end anytime soon, this war. It's dragging on.
Let's imagine an ideal situation. The war is over, the regime in Russia has changed. Will you go back home?
Of course. Yes, I will go back. I was born there.
Do you miss it?
Yes, a lot. It's impossible to put it into words.
I want to stay here, a new place.
What will you do?
Well, that's something to decide later.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian soldiers are addressing their fellow citizens whom their commanders are sending into pointless assaults for the sake of their leaders' delusional ideas and are encouraging them to follow their example.
What would you like to say to them? Don't you feel sorry for your comrades?
No, I don't feel sorry. Maybe that's why I am.
Still very much alive.